All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at Total Alignment Charitable. My name is Mina N. Black. I am one of the co-executive directors here at Total Alignment Charitable. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Melissa, to introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Melissa Gaines. I am the Community Resource Manager here at Total Lemon Charitable.
Awesome.
And I will go ahead and turn it back to Mina.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are. We here at Total Alignment Charitable, for those that aren't familiar with us, what we do here is we provide one-on-one financial plans as well as free personal finance workshops. Our financial plans are completely free as well. We essentially partner you with a qualified, certified financial planner to help you reach your financial goals and to help turn hardship into hope. Today, we have a very, very special guest. We're going to be talking a little bit about emotional and financial resilience with a licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Bunke I was so good. If I pronounce your name correctly, I will. I knew I was going to butcher it when it was time to go live, but thank you for being patient with us. Dr. Awasoga, I'm going to go ahead and just give people a little background about who you are and a little background about how why you are more than qualified to talk to them about today's topic. So she is a licensed psychologist with over 14 years of clinical experience working with adults with chronic or terminal medical conditions, anxiety, depression, trauma loss, and work burnout, among other issues. She has a passion for being an agent of healing for racial and ethnic minority communities and individuals from a bio multicultural background. She has provided presentations and facilitated workshops on various topics related to health and wellness to healthcare providers, organizational executives, and the public. Good afternoon, doctor, and thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm
You're
glad to be here.
Thank you. We are so excited. So, to kick us off, we're going to talk a little bit about financial and emotional resilience. And one of the first things we really want to ask you about is, can you explain how financial worries trigger or worsen common mental health challenges, like anxiety, depression, or burnout, and vice versa?
Um, sure. So when it comes to uh, different things that we experience, stressors, we have in our bodies a system that helps us to regulate when we are perceiving any threat. And sometimes when we face financial challenges, we see that as a threat to our livelihood and well-being. And so our minds don't know the difference in terms of a threat being a financial one, or any other kind of threat, like a physical threat. It just knows there's a threat. And so it's going to respond by triggering what's called our autonomic stress system or stress response. So there's a system in our body that gets aroused when we are threatened, and that just kind of produces that cortisol, the stress hormone. There's systems in our body that go skyrocket up the roof, like our heart racing, right? Shortness of breath. We're not breathing as deeply and normally. And then there's other systems that shut down or they're not as effective, such as our rational thinking, our ability to analyze, to plan, to coordinate these higher level functions of thinking. That kind of shuts down, and other systems shut down, like our digestive system. We're not really hungry when we're pretty much trying to survive, right, in that moment. And so those are some things that can happen when we are faced with any kind of stressor, and financial one is definitely a big stressor for many people that can trigger that stress response.
So it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, when we are under certain types of stressors, and in our case, when we talk about financial stressors, some of those financial stressors can actually manifest physically as well. Um,
Absolutely.
and it can lead to other challenges internally in addition to outside, the outward, our outward, our outward look, essentially, right? It
Mhm.
can manifest.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I think one of the challenges we face is how we actually are able to minimize that. So, what
Mhm.
are some early warnings, signs we should look for, or not just in ourselves, but also in our loved ones, that financial strain is maybe taking a toll on their mental health?
Oh wow, yeah. It's definitely something that it it's tricky because it looks different for everybody. You know, some people can mask things quite well, and others they kind of wear it, they wear it all over them. Um, I think it really would just be to be aware of any changes from the norm that you see in that person. If they are one who's talkative, but now they're more withdrawn, they used to be very and just kind of very talkative when speaking to you, but now they're very vague in their responses, right? They're not kind of giving you detailed answers. They're withdrawing maybe from invitations that you extend to them. You kind of sense something is off in terms of how not not only how they're responding, even though they seem to be functional, right? Because there's a lot of that happens. We can be functional, but then there's something underneath that, and people could tell, but they just can't put their finger on it. That's what you're looking for. There's something there, but I can't put my finger on it, and it really is just speaking to some differences that you're noticing in just how they're presenting, how they're showing up, how they're responding, what they do versus what they don't do anymore, or how much of it or less of it they do. And just to be inquisitive and just ask questions based on observations, not assumptions. Just saying, oh, I've noticed this versus this, is there something you want to talk about or share, that kind of thing, or just bring up outright your concerns. I'm concerned about you. This is what I've been noticing.
That's very, very interesting. I think, Melissa, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so what you're saying, I think that's so important. Me and Mina were just sharing earlier how we both have individuals who um, were not had financial struggles and it affected their mental health to the extreme. So what's some advice? I know you mentioned some brief examples of how we can approach individuals, but do you have any advice that you can provide individuals who are supporting partners or family members or friends to support them who are struggling with that situation, both with their money and their mental health challenges, without really falling into that judgment or enabling zone? Because I think that can be a challenge that we have sometimes, where you don't want to judge and you also don't want to enable and help that situation continue. So, do you have any suggestions in that regard?
Yeah, that also is quite tricky because I believe that similar to other issues that come up, it's something that is happening underneath it. So I'll give, an example that I may often see where someone is maybe smoking, and everybody wants them to stop. It's not healthy, but no one asks them why. What is it helping them with? Because we engage in behaviors that do offer some kind of benefit to us, whether it's considered healthy or not. And it's really recognizing why we're doing what we're doing. So it's not so much the financial advice, it's there is behavior around the spending um or the how they're organizing their finances and when they're paying things or how they're doing things. Um, that's kind of, I think, more of the important thing to look at or to try to help them to be more aware of or figure out. How did I come to learn this habit? Where did it come from? How does it help me now? Is it helping me now? What is it costing me? Right? So I often would work on a cost benefit analysis, ironically enough, in this financial space. But in a mental health space, you use it to look at a behavior that you want to change. And you see, well, what's the cost to changing this behavior? What's the benefit or the advantage of changing this behavior? And similarly, what's the cost of staying the same? And what's the benefit of staying the same? So it's really a quadrant, and it's helpful to really um, be honest with yourself about each of those quadrants. So I think that may be a tool to start with someone so that they become more aware of why they're doing what they're doing.
Interesting enough, I would love to you hit on something that I actually had never considered, which is something you said about, like, for example, the example you gave of somebody who's smoking and what that behavior is helping that person with, and approaching the individual from that perspective, versus judging them on
Mhm.
the behavior itself. I'm curious to hear from you, in the context of seeing someone, to Melissa's question, somebody who's struggling with just any financial challenges that they may be facing. There may be some behaviors they're engaging in. Are there examples of ways to have that conversation,
Mm.
to not be, to Melissa's point, to come across as being judgmental, or to come across as, so that we can get to the core of the behavior that that new activity, if it is a new activity, or that behavior is helping them with?
Yeah, I guess one example that I can think of, and it may not apply to everyone, is when we spend when we spend money that we don't have towards things that are probably low on the priority list in terms of our livelihood. Um, and so if this person is struggling with that, I would just kind of say first, it's always a I notice, right? I notice that um, when you share with me about not having enough money, I wonder kind of, where that money is going towards. And if they're honest, they'll say, okay, well, I shop, but that's just like, I have to look the part, or I think they immediately go into the rationale of why they do what they do, but are we paying attention? Um, I I need versus I want is something to, I think, pay close attention to. So when you're having the conversation, picking up on words such as those, because that's an indication of their mindset. If I need something, then it's a requirement for me to spend in this area versus I want something, so that I can pick up on the fact that I may be more aware that I'm choosing. But if I say I need, I don't believe that there may feel like there's a choice in that. So having this conversation with them, a lot of it being, I'm noticing this. What's your thoughts about that? Right. And as they share with you, then kind of going back to, okay, so it seems like it's benefiting you. I'm wondering what the benefits have been for you. And do you feel like it's cost you anything? So it's more starting out with the benefits and working into the cost, and just having them sit with both of those things. Not you drawing a conclusion for them, but just having them sit with those things, and see if they come up with something in that moment, or maybe they will realize something later on.
Um, I think you're bringing up some really great points in regards to kind of how to help your loved ones and support them. And but what point do you think individuals should start considering seeking, formal mental health support, such as therapy, support groups, or psychiatric care, in addition to the financial planning? Because you can only get, not like it's not separate. It's not an and, or it's a and. It's not necessarily an or. And if someone's suffering from having the financial challenges, finding the support in that is one area. But when do you think that it passes the point where it's just getting support from friends and family to, what, I need some official support and formal support from a therapist or a psychiatrist?
I'm biased. I'm gonna say that it should happen not when it's too late, but it should happen immediately when you are aware that there is a problem. Um, and I think that's a healthy approach to everything that we do. Financial health, mental health, physical health. It's not that we wait till there's a problem. We should be doing check-ins along the way, especially at those points when we're going through changes. You think about even just a woman, as she goes through different markers of changes in her life, there is a need to pay attention to aspects of her health at that point. Not that something comes up, but that we know that there's a change happening. And so, in the case of finances, if I know that I'm transitioning from maybe uh, living in an apartment or renting to home ownership, I may want to proceed that process with some counseling around, change. We often hear people going through premarital counseling because of an upcoming change that's happening in their life that's quite significant. And there are things that they would need to think about entering into this new era. Same thing with motherhood. So I think that if we start to look at this more broadly as just an aspect that is um, part of life stressors. And when we go through different life stressors, what do we do in that instance? We tend to prepare ourselves with information, with going to a professional for any particular advice, things that we need to keep in mind to prepare ourselves, right? And I'm sure um, as you all in the financial sector, you are likely to be preparing people for whatever is coming up. And I think counseling should be just naturally a part of that process because any change is going to bring stress.
No, that's really, thank you for that. That's actually pretty, really interesting. We just want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about the work that you do, specifically regarding the cultural and community context of the work you do. You've worked extensively with multicultural and immigrant populations and communities. What culturally informed approaches to healing have you found the most effective when money worries intersect with identity stress?
And so when you say identity stress, help me understand what you mean.
Absolutely. So one of the things that myself being from an immigrant community, I come from a very community and communal oriented culture, whereby it's almost whereby your money's my money, and you
Okay.
essentially have budget line items for various people in your family, right? And that can take a toll on you financially,
Mhm.
especially when you're trying to progress. So I'm curious if you have experienced that in terms of the people you've dealt with or the communities you dealt with, and how that can be that can be dealt with.
Yes, that has definitely come up. And it is something that, for one, is normalized, that there are cultures that are more communal than others. And whenever you are um, making progress, there is kind of this tendency to differentiate yourself from others while still keeping connection. And that's a very stressful line to tread. So the the healing part of it is an ongoing journey, I would say that. What I have found, it's going to be quite dependent on the level of acculturation. And by that I mean acculturation just means to what extent um, one is adaptable to the cultural climate that they're in. And some people are more it ranges from assimilating, and that is kind of you are letting go of all of your heritage, all of who you are culturally, your original or your culture of origin. You're kind of putting that to the back burner and you're taking on, embracing the culture that you're in and identifying very closely with that. It can be that you're more separate, you're separate, and that is I'm holding on to my original culture even though I'm in this new one. I don't take on what they do, how they are, their norms. And then the acculturation is kind of this navigation of both and. And so there is an honoring of the culture of origin while embracing the culture that you're in. And a lot of immigrants coming here struggle, with that. And those who are born here and have parents who migrated here struggle with that. A lot of it is having conversations around what do we both want for this family. And I would dare say that every parent wants their child to be successful. And I think when we use terms, we don't define what that means and how that would look like. So I think it's really important when we're having conversations, let's be on the same page with how we're using the words that we're using. We want you to be successful. We want you to get your education and do this and do that. Okay, but once that's done, though, and I start to acquire money, then what does that success ultimately look like? Is it that I am financially independent on my own? Is it that I am, you know, able to pay off my house in 10 years? Because if that's success, then that would mean that it would kind of come out of some money that I would otherwise give you. Like, let's have honest conversations about the words that we're using, um, and give people grace around the fact that, um, how do I say, I think when particularly, an older generation, it is harder to adjust to a culture, um, and their children take on a culture that's different from what they have done because they've also been probably in that position where they've given to their parents. And so there's an expectation that my children give to me. So they're also in a tough spot if a change is happening there. But those are tricky conversations to have, but I think they need to be had. And a mutual understanding needs to be reached as to what's comfortable for me while I'm still honoring and respecting you. Um, this is actually going to be helpful for both of us if I approach it this way. It may not seem that way, but it actually helps the both of us if I'm able to um, allocate my resources differently than how you might expect me to.
That's so that's so that's one of the most difficult and challenging conversations to have,
Mhm.
being part of the immigrant population, is those honest conversations about how to approach almost the disbursement of whatever resources are
Mhm.
coming in, whether it's your own or their resources, and how to approach it when you have such different takes on how to grow as a community, right? So
Mhm.
I'm really curious to see how some of those conversations go for other people. And I think part of the challenge and one of the most challenging things when it comes to these conversations is, especially if you're part of the younger generation, is the self-care piece. So do you have any hints or tips on how we can, what daily or weekly self-care practices that we can do to essentially sustain the emotional well-being during some of these financial stress conversations, during some of these challenging conversations we have, not just with our the older population or our parents, but also with our partners and other relatives.
Um, I think self-care should be based on what you value. So I think first it's exploring what you value. What do you prioritize? What's most important to you? Some people value adventure. Other people value relaxation. Those are two extremes. You know, you want adventure, that's arousal, that's excitement, that's all new stuff. That may not be me. So my self-care may look different than your, bungee jumping self-care. Um, so checking with what you value, uh, what what makes you excited? Somebody's self-care might actually be um, volunteering with a charity at a charity event. That's still self-care. I think when people think of self-care, they're thinking more, massage and going to, get your nails done and things like that, or and that is self-care. That is a form of self-care, but there's a lot of different forms of self-care. So I think between partners or family members, what self-care might look like. Hopefully, I would think that would include some kind of quality time together. And that quality time can take on the form of having a barbecue in the backyard. It can take on the form of, going to the park, taking a ride. It can look like so many different things, but I think the basis of self-care should be what you value, not what kind of is a prescription that any outside source gives you.
Makes
I, lo- I love that. I think that that's so many times people forget about looking at themselves and seeing exactly what they want because they think that there's a structure that they need to follow or like, hey, this is what everyone else likes, so I need to focus on that. So um I personally hate massages, but I know other people love massages, so that's like a great thing for them. um
Mhm.
so like I mentioned earlier, I'm the community resource manager. I am always on the look for new resources or the best resources, especially someone in your position who I'm sure utilizes certain resources for their patients and for the individuals that they work with in the community. You've given us some great tips on how to support people, but do you have any community or online resources such as like apps or hotlines, maybe even some support networks that you personally would recommend for attendees seeking ongoing emotional or financial support after today's session?
Sure. I mean, some common ones as far as the mental health space are organizations like NAMI. That's N as in Nancy, M as in Mary, I. NAMI is short for the National Alliance for on Mental Illness, and that's a national organization. So NAMI.org. Mental Health America is another one. I believe they may even have some financial resources, but I know that these places have, group support, education material, that kind of stuff. And so Mental Health America, and I think I think it's just mhamerica.org or something like that. Um, I would be I would be remiss if I don't mention any crisis intervention related tools. NAMI for sure is one, but 988 is kind of like the 911, but for kind of a mental health crisis. So it's a national hotline, it's 24/7. It should not take the place if someone is actively suicidal, meaning they're, in the process of the plan that they want to execute to take their life. But if they're having thoughts and just need someone to talk to, the stress for finance is just so overwhelming. Sometimes really just talking about it, releasing that can be really helpful. So 988 is an easy resource to remember. If you're looking for a psychologist or mental health counselor or someone who can provide you with therapy, professional support, you can look on directories such as Psychology Today. That's a pretty common directory where all sorts of mental health providers are on. Um, and as far as any financial information, I am not off the top of my head aware of any. I will probably have to go into like my list of resources and see if there's any. Um, but I'm sure that with the with the support kind of emotionally, right? That there is at least going to be some relief about how I can cope with the financial stressors. And then the specific financial resources as far as planning and the actual problem solving it out, um, you know, um, will kind of marry the two, right? So I may not be able to change everything, but I can cope with it. And then now let's work on actually making those changes that I need to make. So hopefully that's apps. There's the common ones like Headspace and um, a lot of meditation apps, breathing apps are really helpful. Any one of those that helps you to practice deep breathing is going to be amazing because it speaks to what I started out with, that autonomic stress response that raises our cortisol, it raises our blood pressure. It's not good for us long term. Deep breathing sounds simple, but it is actually very effective. So, any app that helps you to do that, I would recommend.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor. This has been an amazing session. Before we wrap up, we would love to know how people can get in touch with you if they are interested in working with you. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Sure. So I can be reached. My practice is called Aura Life Wellness, ORA Life Wellness .com, and contact information is on there. You can shoot me a message, and I usually respond within 3 business days.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your patience and thank you so much for giving us such
Sure.
amazing insights into just ways for us to build emotional resilience. We appreciate your time. And to everyone who was able to join us today, we want to thank you for being part of the Total Alignment Charitable community. As I mentioned, one of the things that we were really passionate about here is turning hardship into hope. And the way we do that is by providing free, unbiased financial plans. You get to work with a financial planner over the course of 12 weeks to help you reach whatever financial goals that you have in mind. So you can check us out. Our website is www.totalalignmentcharitable.org, and we hope to see you at the next session. Have a good day.
Thank you all.